What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crawdad Lake. Today we'll be reading Jailed, chapters 9 through 16 by ElliottGreen333 on Wattpad. The links to the author and to the book will be in the description below. Chapter 8. Logan gained a feeling of stress and questions rush over him. He kept looking at Virgil, trying to keep his facial expression calm, as he didn't want to make Virgil panicked too. The last thing Logan wanted to do was not help Virgil. I think Remus killed Damien, if that's what you're asking, Virgil said suddenly. Logan nodded, leaning back into his chair slightly. Or I think so. I think so too, or at least I don't think you killed him. Logan sat on his words for a second. Do you mind if I asked who those men were in the cell that were beating you? They worked for Damien. We worked in the same division for a long time until they got promoted to a higher league, Virgil explained. His hair kept falling innocently over his eyes, which he would push aside. Logan's heart couldn't help but flutter in this adorable nature. What division were you in? Logan asked, putting his headset back into a more professional setting. I was mainly a lookout while the higher ranks actually robbed the buildings. I was also Damien's, his plaything. Virgil choked out. Logan's face fell. He knew he was Damien's plaything. Virgil had said it for the first time they met, and it was hinted at in his file. Logan just wished that it wasn't the truth. Logan simply nodded. That was said in your file. You've been admitted to the hospital several times? 26. What? I've been admitted to the hospital 26 times, Virgil said. Logan's mouth fell ajar. Logan had barely seen a hospital 26 times, let alone been in one. Logan shut his mouth and Virgil chuckled a little. Most people get speechless. You carry quite a lot of baggage, don't you, Virgil Black? Logan asked, leaning back into his table. Virgil nodded with a cracked smile. Logan was really breaking through. Your file also says you were kidnapped by Damien. What can you tell me about that? Logan asked. Virgil froze and shrunk into his seat. His eyes met the floor. His hair fell over his face, and he didn't try to move. I don't want to talk about that, Virgil muttered. Logan could barely hear Virgil, but understood what he meant. Virgil, I need to know this information so I can help you. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. His stutter became worse. You have to, please, Virgil. Whatever happened is in the past. I can help you realize that. No, you can't. Please, drop it, Virgil begged. His eyes were dripping tears and his jaw was shut tight. Do you want me to help you or not? Logan shouted. Virgil's eyes locked with Logan's. Both of their faces read a shocked expression. Logan didn't mean to yell. It just happened. It was only now Logan had noticed Virgil's uneven breaths and trembling body. Virgil, I'm... Logan couldn't even spell out the words before Virgil's eyes rolled back into his head and his dead weight pulled into the side. His body fell out of the chair and onto the ground. Logan stood up, but words were taken from him. The door burst open and Roman ran inside. He went to Virgil and examined him. It seemed like forever, but Roman looked at Logan and took a breath. He's fine. You just gave him an anxiety attack. I know that, Roman. Did he hurt his head or anything when he fell? Oh no, he's fine. We'll just give him a private cell after what happened today. Why don't you go back to your office so he can wake up peacefully? Logan loosely nodded and headed out of the room. He felt guilt right up in his spine, perch on his shoulders. The weight literally slowed him down at the drag of his feet back to his office. When he walked into his office, a certain brother of his was sitting in the chair, patiently waiting for him. Logan's eyebrows raised. Shouldn't you be down at your desk? Logan asked. Patton sighed and stood up. He crossed to his brother and put his hands on his shoulders. Tam has told me what happened, Patton said. Great, Logan thought. The chief was in the other room and saw Logan make Virgil pass out. Logan sighed, putting his head in his hands. Oh, hey, it's okay. He isn't mad or anything, Patton assured him. Don't you get it, Patton? My job is to help, not hurt. With this case, it seemed to make things worse than better, Logan said, looking up Patton again. Patton's eyes, which once laced in comfort, were laced in worry. Do you like Virgil? Patton questioned. Logan's eyes widened. He didn't know what to say. He was in that feeling Logan had whenever he was with Virgil. Is that why he found his innocent nature adorable? And why he wished to protect Virgil at any cost? Logan sighed and gave in. I think I have a tiny crush on Virgil. Penn was silent for a moment, his brain processing the information. His face then illuminated with joy as a high-pitched squeak escaped Patton's lips. Logan, this is amazing! Patton jeered. You aren't upset or worried about him? Logan asked. What? No, I'm not Dad, Patton joked. He backed out of Logan's office, his rosy cheeks in a full smile. If you like him, then he's no prisoner, Patton said before slowly moving down the stairs. Logan let a long breath and sat down in his chair. Logan replayed his interaction with his brother in his head. He laughed to himself about the joke Patton had told. Logan and Patton's foster father wasn't against them two being gay. He would just become quiet whenever we brought a boy over and never wanted to talk to the boys they, mainly Patton, brought home. Patton has had small relationships over time, whilst Logan had one long-lasting relationship, which ended roughly. After 2 years of Logan and his other boy dating, Logan learned that his boyfriend had a secret girlfriend. Logan was crushing. He really thought he understood love and what it meant, but it turns out he was wrong. Logan wasn't the same after that. He didn't tell Patton who liked him anymore. He didn't bring anyone home. He just put up his walls, and that's how it stayed until Logan moved out. Chapter 9. Logan knew he had the day off. Logan knew that he should take the day off for himself after the events of yesterday, but Logan couldn't have allowed himself to be alone in his apartment all day when he knew Virgil's court hearing was today. Logan usually went to all of his clients' hearings, but Thomas told him to relax and enjoy the day. Logan didn't want to. Virgil was such a different client than other cases. The other cases he hated going to, but if Virgil's sentence was on the line, how could Logan not be there? Logan put on his bedsuit, grabbed his car keys, and hopped down the set of stairs to his apartment's ground floor. He exited the building and headed towards his car, unlocking and opening the door. He stuck the key into the ignition and felt the engine roar with life. He placed his hands on the wheel and pulled out of the parking spot and moved to the main road. His heart was pounding with something that he thought was a mix of joy and anticipation. He emerged onto the highway and relaxed as the sounds of the cars put him at ease. Getting off the highway, Logan directed the car into the courtroom's parking lot and parked in front. He ejected the keys and stored them safely in his pocket. The detective got out of his car and walked inside the courtroom. It was a nice building. It had a lot of natural light entering through massive windows. Logan wandered to the main desk where the woman sat. She gave Logan a friendly smile. Hi, I'm glad to see you. I'm looking for Virgil's Black hearing, Logan said with a question. Are you friend, family, or jury? The lady asked. Friend, Logan stated. The kind lady pointed to the back room and told Logan he shouldn't have missed much. Logan thanked her and followed her directions. He opened the door quietly and scanned the room with his eyes. The jury was full, and the seats in the back were very full. Logan made his way to the seats like a spy, sitting down calmly and listening. Virgil was in the defendant's chair, with a slightly angry lawyer sitting next to him. Virgil's hands were cuffed in front, and his face was drowned in sweat. Could I see Mr. Black's criminal and personal records, please? The judge bellowed. Roman, who was the security guard for the case, took the file from Virgil's table and walked it over to the judge. The judge looked inside of it, examining every word like he could miss something very important. It says here you were kidnapped at age 15 by Damien Lai. Is that true, Mr. Black? The judge called. Virgil nodded fearfully. The judge looked back at the file before putting it down and looking Virgil in the eyes. Are you aware Damien Lai was murdered less than 4 days ago, Mr. Black? And that you were there at the crime scene when the police first found Damien Lai? Logan didn't like the judge's tone anymore. Yes, I'm aware, sir. Virgil stuttered. Logan's eyes narrowed. He hated seeing Virgil like this. How am I to know that you didn't kill Damien Lai, Mr. Black? Do you have any proof or an alibi? The judge spat. Virgil flinched at the words, but he shook his head. A long sigh came from the judge. These types of hearings really waste my time, he mumbled. Virgil hung his head. Logan's face was glowing red with anger. He was holding onto his chair in front of him so hard his knuckles were turning white. Does the jury have a verdict? The judge asked. Quiet echoes swept into the room as the jury started to reach for the conclusion. Virgil's lawyer hadn't even gotten a chance to speak by the looks on his face. He didn't really have anything to clear his name. This was a nightmare. The jury had reached his decision. The judge hollered. Virgil Black? He roared, grumbling his gravel. I hereby sentence you guilty for the second-degree murder of Damien Lai. His gavel lowered to his desk. Logan gathered all his curtains and darted up straight. Stop! Logan hollered before the judge could hit the gravel. All the courtroom's eyes went to him, including Virgil's hopeful eyes. I object, Logan continued. The judge rolled his eyes and laughed to himself. Sir, I'm sorry, but you are not part of the jury, therefore your words mean nothing to me. You're right. I am not the jury, but that does not mean I do not have a voice. Logan walked up the aisle his seat was in and made his way to the judge. Roman didn't stop him. He could see the flames on the side of Logan's face. He knew to stay back. Logan pulled his badge out of his pocket and shoved it into the judge's face. Detective Logan Sanders, do you see the badge, sir? Logan inquired. Yes, I can see your badge. What's your point? The judge whined. Mr. Black is my case, and I could say for certain he is not guilty. Well, do you have any proof or an alibi, Mr. Black? Logan stopped at the question. He looked back at Virgil, who flashed him a smile and gave him a thumbs up. Logan smirked and faced the judge again. Perhaps I do not, but I can get one to you. Logan took a breath. Here's what's going to happen here. You are going to give me a week to get Virgil's proof and alibi to you, and then we'll meet back here. Same place, same time. The judge's features narrowed, the idea swimming through his thoughts. Logan's smirk didn't drop. He knew he was winning. Fine, the judge said, finally giving in. You have a week to do so. And Virgil gets to peril with me until next week. Logan quickly spoke. The jury gasped and Virgil was left in a shocked expression. He couldn't believe that Logan was trying to do. It was enough to Virgil that Logan even stuck up for him. The judge's eyes were wide, the panic obvious on his face. He looked to Roman, who shrugged with a sly look on his face. The judge banged his gravel on the desk, making Logan jump. I hereby grant Virgil Black 1 week peril under the supervision of Detective Logan Sanders. Court adjourned. The gavel came down once again, and the judge stood up. He shoved Virgil's file into Logan's chest and leaned into Logan so he could hear him. Good luck. You're gonna need it. The judge then walked out of the room, leaving Logan slightly shocked. Logan then went over to Virgil's table. Logan looked at him. So much happiness was in his eyes alone. Logan couldn't help but blush. Thank you, Virgil breathed. Of course, that's what friends do. Come on, I'm taking you to the station. We're getting your normal clothes back. Orange isn't your color. Chapter 10. Logan walked inside the police station, and Virgil right behind him. Virgil scanned the place with anxious eyes, watching everyone as if they were out to get him. Logan supposed he understood. Being a registered criminal would probably do that to you. They continued until they were in front of the evidence locker. Logan dug his keys into his pocket, scanning his keycard and listening to the door click open. Logan grabbed the metal door's handle and pulled it open with the email behind him. Virgil blushed, and whose cheeks were a little red, in return. Virgil proceeded to the evidence locker as Logan followed behind him, letting the door shut. Logan looked around the room. Somewhere he hadn't been in a long time. Everything the station had ever collected from the town's criminals. Everything from guns, knives, makeshift bombs. Logan led Virgil to his shelf. Logan was moving quickly as the room made him uneasy. They both stopped in a shelf labeled 04891219, Virgil's number. The shelf laid a lump of clothes, some earbuds, and a small pocket knife. Logan's face lit up as he grabbed them and checked to make sure everything was still there. He smiled happily. Logan, which made them both blush. Virgil gave a stiff smile, rubbing the back of his head. "There is a changing room behind you if you are at all interested," Logan said, his blush dying down. Virgil nodded and walked inside the changing room. Logan turned his gaze to the door and entered firm. No one was there. Logan let out a breath. The air was thick with tension. The last time Logan was in this room, he had finished arresting Damien for the first time. The room held these memories above his head, taunting him, but he couldn't let it show, not in front of Virgil. Logan noticed the shelf above Virgil's, 05890213, Damien's things. Logan curiously pulled him closer to the shelf. All of his items were already cleared. There was no need to keep him if he was dead, right? Logan sighed. He was once so close to figuring out David's motives and drives. However, all of that was now in the past. He had to believe that if he wanted to fully focus on Virgil's case. The changing room door swung open and Virgil walked out with a half smile creeping up his face. Logan was breathless. Virgil wore a dark purple ripped shirt under his black jacket with purple patches. He also had torn black jeans and black combat boots. His hands were casually in his pockets, fidgeting with the pocket knife and his earbuds as he risked a glance at Logan. "I think black suits you better," Logan commented. "I think black feels better than that orange," Virgil remarked. They both exited the locker, Logan shutting the door firmly behind them. They proceeded to the main lobby, Logan leading Virgil up the stairs to his office. Virgil still seemed uneasy with all the people. Logan took note of this. Logan opened the office door for Logan and Virgil to walk inside. Virgil's eyes were bouncing from picture to picture on Logan's bulletin board. Logan hummed in amusement and sat down at his desk. "Quite the hero, huh?" Virgil mumbled. "You could say that," Logan shrugged, pushing his glasses further onto his face. Virgil started to make his way towards the newspaper clippings now, reading each one of them carefully. "Are all of those on Damien? He was your number one priority, wasn't he?" Logan pulled his collar away from his neck. "Well, yes. He messed with my family, and that wasn't okay," Logan stated. Logan could swear he saw Virgil flinch a little bit, but he didn't press this matter. Virgil stepped away from the board and took a seat across from Logan. The detective turned to his computer and pulled up Damien's last known locations before he was killed. "All right, we've got a big assessment ahead of us, and only a week to do it. I suggest we gather as much information as we can about who can help prove you are not guilty and go from there," Logan suggested. Virgil nodded and relaxed a bit more in his chair. Virgil kept looking from the floor to Logan. "Thank you," Virgil blurted. Logan raised an eyebrow. "What was that?" I said thank you for, helping me. I am just not used to people having my back, I guess." Virgil rubbed his arm out of nerves. Logan's small smile blossomed wider. His heart was beating heavily. Why was this man so adorable? "It's nothing, Virgil. It is my job. Besides, you aren't guilty," Logan said confidently. Virgil looked back down at the ground with red dusting his face. Logan began typing on his computer before looking back at Virgil again. "Who would have seen you the night before you got arrested?" Logan asked. "That's the thing. That part of town is free of security cameras, and it it was past midnight. I doubt anyone was around to see Damien die and then watch me find him, Virgil said in a breath. He leaned back against the chair, rubbing his head. A few tears slipped down his face. Logan pushed the small tissue box on his desk closer to Virgil. Maybe I am guilty. Maybe I'm just in denial, or I don't know what I saw. Virgil huffed. Hey, don't say that. You aren't guilty. You're afraid. It's okay to feel that way, Virgil. Logan comforted him. Virgil dried his tears and nodded in agreement, sitting back up. Where did you find Damien? West 5th and Park, between two big buildings. Would that location have any significance to Damien? Virgil sat on that question for a second before his face lit up in realization. That's where he would do drug deals or wait for an oncoming pedestrian so he could rob them. I bet those drug dealers are our best options for questioning. What else? Sometimes there's this man at the park with a hot dog cart. I don't know if he'd been out there the past midnight, but that might be worth a shot, Virgil said, starting to feel better about the case already. Virgil pondered the location in his head for a second. His face lit up with a small moment, leaving Virgil on the edge of his seat. There is a museum across the street. They have to have cameras, Logan exclaimed. He stood up there and grabbed his bag. Virgil had a very confused look, but Logan's lip rose to a smirk. Come on, the museum is still open. Chapter 11. Logan guided Virgil to his car in the back parking lot. Virgil seemed less tense, not only because there weren't any people around, but he seemed more comfortable in his own clothing. When they reached Logan's car, he fished for his keys and stuck the key in the door, unlocking it. Logan opened the car and hit the button, unlocking the passenger door. Virgil sat in Logan's car, admiring the cleanliness of his car. Logan took a seat too, feeling the seat sink as he leaned further into it. The key met the ignition as the engine sparked to life. Virgil buckled himself up and sat in his hands. Logan started pulling out of the parking lot spot and continued out of the parking lot. The drive was growing quiet, which was making Virgil antsy. So, what music do you like? Virgil pondered, trying to lighten the mood. Classical mostly, or at least that's all I've listened to in a while. I studied it during college. It's proven to be good for studying, Logan told him. Virgil nodded, his heart fluttering a bit. What about you? I like bands, mainly My Chemical Romance, Falling in Reverse, Fall Out Boy, things like that. The music really brings me back down to earth, Virgil hummed. Logan nodded, mindlessly driving while deeply engaged in the conversation. You said you went to college. What was your major? Criminal studies with a minor in biology, Logan said quickly. Virgil thought for a second, but the silence making Logan think he had said something wrong. Is something the matter, Virgil? Logan questioned, wishing he hadn't said anything. Huh? Virgil turned his head to look at Logan. He shook his head. Oh, no, I just remember going to college. I really enjoyed school, but all that got taken away. You were kidnapped at 15. You were in college by then? Logan said, astonished by his words. Yeah, I only lasted 3 semesters of high school before the teachers realized I wasn't in the correct grade. My teachers helped me enroll into Florida State. I was only there for a year before, you know. Virgil's voice cracked at the end. Logan tapped the steering wheel, anxiously waiting for the light to change. What was your original major? Logan asked. The light shifted, allowing him to go. I was undeclared. Although the day was taken, I was going to declare an art major. Logan pulled into the museum parking lot, silently parking his car in front. He moved his key and shifted to Virgil, who avoided eye contact. Thank you for sharing that, Virgil, Logan said soothingly. Virgil nodded with a small smile. His ears were red. Logan then got out of the car. Virgil was right behind him. Logan opened the museum door for Virgil, who playfully laughed and rolled his eyes. The museum was a landmark for a small Florida town. There was a main entrance with dividing hallways and led into different exhibits. The paint on the walls was chipping and the lights were turned, the whole building yellow. Logan's shoulders stiffened. He did not like it here. Logan walked to the main desk, pulling out his badge and showing it to the man behind the desk. Hello, I'm Detective Logan Sanders. We are under the impression that you have security cameras pointing towards the street behind you. The man nodded. Logan smirked and tucked away his badge. Perfect. We'd like to see your footage from the past week. Who is we, exactly? The man asked. Virgil made himself known to the man and stepped out from behind Logan. The guy at the desk eyed him oddly. His stomach was nodding. Sir, your cameras? Logan pressed. The man nodded, still eyeing Virgil. They followed the man from the desk to the back room, unlocking the door and letting them inside. Logan thanked him, and he let the two alone in the room. Did you know that person? Logan asked. No, I didn't, Virgil responded. Logan frowned, but guided his gaze to the computer in the front of him. The cameras were surveying the inside and outside of the building. Logan found a camera that pointed to the street behind the museum and clicked it, making it a full screen. Logan began tracking the footage back. Virgil looked around anxiously. The room was very small and tight. It was obviously a storage room. Virgil didn't like it. It had remnants of old exhibits, like fake dinosaur fossils. Everything in the room felt like it was ready to attack the two, like the room knew they didn't belong there. Virgil's stomach twisted again, but Logan tapped him on the arm, removing him from his thoughts. I found it, Logan said. Virgil looked curiously at the cameras, watching the scene play. The speed of the footage was moving fast, but everything could be seen clearly. There could be seen three men smoking in the alleyway. They were laughing and fighting, high as kites. After they left, Damien came trudging along, holding his stomach and limping. It didn't take much to recognize his pain. Damien leaned against the brick wall of the building next door. A few seconds after that, his eyes rolled to the back of his head and he collapsed onto the ground, lifeless, with a trail of blood leaving his mouth. He flinched, but watched himself on the cameras. He made his way around the corner and saw Damien. The past Virgil tried to shake Damien awake, only getting blood on his hands. All of a sudden, the camera began to glow brightly as lights and headlights surrounded Virgil. He put his hands up, and Logan could see Roman and a few other officers get out of the car. Virgil was weakly protesting them while tears flowed from his eyes. Logan went wide-eyed. The cameras showed Roman get Virgil into handcuffs, while the officer connected a taser to Virgil's side. He let a scream escape and his knees gave out. Virgil went limp, which let Roman scoop him up over his shoulder and carry him to the car. Logan backed out of the video, almost speechless. Virgil, I'm so sorry that happened, Logan stuttered. He looked back and saw Virgil became into the far corner of the room. Tears were flooding down his face, and he was shaking terribly. Virgil! Logan exclaimed. He stood up and paced quickly to the man in the corner. He flinched as Logan came closer. Hey, it's okay, Logan said softly. Logan reached out and grabbed Virgil's hand, which was resting on his knees, which he had pulled up to his chest. Virgil's head darted up, and it looked in contact, but he looked at Logan in his calm, deep brown eyes. It's okay, Virgil. It's in the past. You're okay now. Logan was starting to realize why Virgil would only talk to Logan back at the station. Virgil nodded and took a couple shaky breaths. Logan looked as he watched and sighed. Come on, today was long. Let's get back to my apartment, and I could set you up in my guest bedroom tonight. Virgil nodded and let Logan help him to his feet. Once he was grounded, they walked out of the back room and proudly walked out of the museum, both their hands still wound together. Chapter 12. Logan parked his car in the apartment complex, taking the stop labeled 113, his apartment number. Logan turned the off and left the engine, slowly loosened its spark, setting the car to sleep for the night. Virgil glanced over at Logan nervously, looking down in his lap. When Logan noticed Virgil, finally Virgil sighed and faced Logan. Look, Logan, I appreciate the offer for me to stay in your apartment, but I can't ask you to do that. You're already doing so much for me with my case, and you're already stuck with me for a week. Virgil rambled on. Logan was listening, but only partially paying attention. Virgil talked slow, but when he realized Logan had tangled in his hands, Virgil blushed, but looked up at Logan, biting his lip. You are no burden to me. I considered you a friend. Now come on. You're bound to be tired. Logan insisted. Virgil sighed and nodded slowly, giving in to Logan's offer. They exited the car, hopping up onto one of the pavement. Virgil followed Logan up a small flight of stairs, stopping at the first door in the line, 113. Logan fiddled with the key before hearing the click and pushing the door open. Virgil stepped inside, looking around in awe. The apartment had a small living room with a closet straight ahead. To the left was a kitchen with dark brown cabinets and white countertops. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to a small balcony that laid outside. Virgil wandered down the hallway into the living room, a door to the left as soon as he walked into the hall. The room was Logan's study. Virgil could tell by the giant bookshelf and desk scattered with loose papers and files. To the right was a bedroom, with a hall closet in between. Furthermore, there were 3 more bedrooms, 2 to the left and 1 to the right, with a small master bedroom next to a singular bedroom. Virgil's mouth hung open ajar, admiring the apartment. Not only was it the size of a castle to Virgil, but everything that was in it was Logan's. It felt so homey to Virgil, which made it all feel more better. Logan was leaning against the wall behind Virgil, hands in his pockets. Logan just watched, a smile finding its way onto his face. Virgil turned around to face Logan, his eyes sparkling. "This is quite a big apartment for just you, isn't it?" Virgil asked. "I suppose," Logan shrugged. "It wasn't always this empty. My brother Patton and an officer named Roman used to live here with me. Patton moved into his own apartment, and Roman started to roommate with other co-workers," Logan explained. "And you haven't looked for a new and smaller apartment?" "No, this one holds too many memories. Plus, you never know when you'll need to house a guest for a while," Logan said, his eyebrows raised. Virgil understood, his face blushing under his bangs. "Your room is the one on the left. If you need anything during the night, my room is the next one over, okay?" Logan asked. Virgil smiled and nodded in confirmation and slowly walked over to the smaller room. The room had a full bed with a drawer and a TV on top. Virgil kicked his shoes off and put them neatly by the door. His feet were squished into the brown yarn-like carpet. Virgil felt like he was returning home after a long adventure. Logan watched him from the door, his heart turning, watching Virgil's adorable nature. "You're probably gonna want something, so pajama pants or something, huh?" Logan thought aloud. "Just sweatpants or something similar," Virgil said, turning to Logan. The detective nodded and rushed to his room. Virgil mindlessly walked to the bed and sat on it. The bed was soft, sinking under his weight. This bed felt much better than anything he had ever slept on. Logan returned quickly with a folded black sweatpants in his hand. Virgil smiled and stifled a laugh. Logan just shrugged and threw them onto Virgil, who caught them and felt them unfold in his hands. Logan joined him, sitting on the bed. Their hands were close together, but neither of them did anything. There was a brief pause. "So, what's next?" Virgil riddled. "In terms of your case?" Logan questioned, to Virgil, which nodded. "Well, we have proof that you didn't physically do any harm to him. But in order to fully prove that you were not guilty, we have to prove you didn't do anything to poison Damien. And the footage of you on the cameras wasn't just you making sure the job was done," Logan explained. Virgil looked awestruck. His eyes were shrunk, full of fear. That sounds like a lot," Virgil stuttered. Logan's hands rested on Virgil's shoulders, calming him. "I know it does, but it'll all be done before you know," Logan assured him. Virgil gently nodded, looking down on his lap. Logan let his shoulders loose and stood up from the bed. Virgil eyed him, and Logan inched towards the door. Virgil shifted oddly in his bed, feeling the sweatpants in his moist hands. "Good night, Logan," Virgil mumbled with a half-smile. Logan turned around, looking slightly caught off guard. Logan blushed, pushing his glasses up. Logan grabbed the door and shut it behind him softly. Virgil got to his feet and started to change his pants into his sweatpants. Logan walked into his bedroom and shut the door. He removed his glasses and put them on the counter, proceeded to wash his face and brush his teeth, winding for the night. Finally, he walked over to the room and put on his own pajamas, which consisted of plaid bottoms and an old t-shirt. Virgil went and climbed into bed and turned off his light. He was staring at the ceiling, his anxiety not letting him sleep very easily. He took in a deep breath and let his eyes close. Even though his mind was racing, his eyes were heavy, full of sleep. Logan was reading in his bed, although he wasn't paying close attention to the context of his book. Well, Logan's full priority was Virgil, but Damien's file was sitting on his nightstand. Logan still couldn't get the mind out of his case. The case meant more to him than the chief knew. He had to finish what he started. He had to. Chapter 13. Logan was the first awake. He suspected so. He always was when Patton and Roman lived with him. Logan rubbed his eyes and let out a small yawn. The sun was creeping through the blinds, lighting up his room just enough so he could see the layout of his room. Logan swung his legs around and stood up. His legs carried his heavy body to the bathroom. He shut the door and removed his clothes, turning on the water in the shower. Logan got in once the water was just his desired temperature. Logan took a quick shower, still slowly waking up. He stepped out of the shower, feeling the cold air in his apartment stick to his damp skin. He wrapped a towel around himself and stood in front of the mirror. Logan dried his short brown hair and combed it back. He put his glasses on and quickly ran into his room to change. He changed into a black polo shirt with a tie and jeans. Logan slipped his charged phone into his pocket and proceeded to the kitchen. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the main room. Logan breathed it in and sighed in content. He grabbed 2 coffee mugs and filled them both with coffee. He also popped some bread into the toaster and prepared it for his guest to wake. Just as the toaster popped with the crisp bread, the sound of the door shutting could be heard from down the hallway. Logan peeked out from the kitchen and saw Virgil. He seemed perky this morning, wearing the same outfit as yesterday, with his hair brushed neatly, draping over his eyes. "Morning," Logan called out to him. Virgil smiled to him and joined him in the kitchen. Logan handed his cup of coffee he made for him. Virgil accepted it gratefully. "You seem happy this morning," Logan hummed. "Yeah, best night's sleep I have ever had," Virgil beamed. Logan chuckled, putting his toast on his plates and spreading butter on them. After that, he handed one plate to Virgil and kept the other for himself. They sat down and engaged in some small talk. The two were laughing and smiling, enjoying each other's company. Virgil insisted on doing the dishes. He grabbed Logan's plate and coffee cup along with his own. He carried them to the sink and washed them down. "So, Virgil," said, turning his head to face Logan, "where is your first stop today?" "I was thinking about trying to talk to the guys that were in the alleyway before Damien. What do you think?" Virgil froze upon hearing Logan's suggestion. His eyes read a mix of thinking and fear. "Is that all right, Virgil?" Virgil shook his head, coming out of a trance. He turned back to the sink and turned off the tap. He then faced Logan fully, leaning against the counter, shoving his hands in his pockets. "I mean, if you think it's needed to prove my innocence, I guess we could do that," Virgil said with a soft smile. Logan returned his beam, standing up from his seat and grabbing his car keys off the hook of the wall. "Shall we be off then?" Logan suggested. Virgil shifted his weight and followed after Logan. The man locked his apartment door. And they trampled down the stairs and headed to Logan's car. Once inside, Logan started the car and listened as the radio's weak signal faded in and out. After that, the two were on the main road, heading towards where they were the night before. Logan parked his car around the corner from the alleyway. The clock in his car read 1 p.m. He turned to Virgil, who was biting his nails close to his skin. Logan reached out and grabbed Virgil's shoulder softly. Their eyes met, and Logan simply smiled with his warm, stern eyes. Virgil felt a bout of confidence flow through him. He nodded to Logan, and they both exited the car. The two walked around the corner. After a little walk, they came face to face to an alleyway. The walls surrounding it were mossy brick. The air was damp and thick, making the two cough. Both of them were surprised no one was there. Virgil shivered as Logan stepped further down. They could see the security camera in the corner watching them. Logan followed where the camera was pointing and tracked it to the ground where a small, dried puddle of blood laid. Logan approached it. He could tell from some memory in his head of the security footage that this was no doubt Damien's old blood. Logan was snapped away from his thoughts where he heard Virgil let out a frightening squeak He turned over and saw 3 other men surrounding Virgil. They were looking at him, touching him, making Virgil shrink into himself. Logan's brow furrowed. "Hey!" Logan shouted. All eyes grew on him. 2 out of the 3 men smiled, but the third lifted his hand. The other 2 stopped. Obviously, the other man was the boss. "Who are you, and what are you doing to my friend?" Logan shouted. The leader stepped closer to Logan, a devilish tint in his eye. As he came closer, Logan's eyes widened. "Remy?" Logan questioned. "Damn right," Remy cackled. He eyed him up and down, giving a detective a smirk. "You've seen better days. Maybe you should take the day off." Remy laughed. Unfortunately for Logan, Remy knew how to press his buttons. "Who's your friend?" Remy asked, looking back at Virgil, who was shaking and looking between the 2 guys holding him in place. "None of your business, Remy. This is a crime scene anyway, and you're the people who we wanted to talk to." Remy cocked his eyebrow up, puffing out his chest. He shrugged and sighed. Logan watched his brother's old boyfriend give the other 2 men some sort of hand signal. They let Virgil go. He went running to Logan. Remy was then joined by his men. "What do you want to know?" Remy smirked. "What was your connection to Damien Lai?" "Oh shit, dude, deceit." Remy and his buddies laughed, leaving Virgil and Logan to show confused looks. "Dude, he's a riot. Always coming to us for the good stuff, sometimes joining us for a smoke. He was a crack-up." Logan took note of this before continuing. Logan hardly noticed, but he was hiding Virgil behind him, protecting him. "Do you know anyone that would have wanted him dead?" Logan asked. "Oh, tons. He was a thief. A damn good one, too. Many people wanted his head. He was just too slippery. If it was my guess, it'd be one of those men that worked for him." Remy chuckled. Virgil's shoulders came inward, obviously uncomfortable. Maybe this was a bad idea. "What's in it this for you, anyway?" Remy asked. "My friend is being blamed for his death, and I'm proving his innocence." There was a moment of silence before the 3 men burst out in laughter. Logan rolled his eyes and grabbed Virgil's hand. "We're getting out of here. These guys are worthless." Logan led his crush back to the car. "Tell your brother his heart is as small as his dick," Remy shouted, followed by howls of laughter. Logan's anger only grew, but he pushed it aside for Virgil. He then let go of his hand and walked over to the driver's side of the car. Logan patted his pants for his keys, unsuccessful in his hunt. He took his hand and walked over to the driver's side of the car. Logan patted his pants for his keys, unsuccessful. He then started fishing for them in his pockets, getting more frantic. "Something wrong?" Virgil asked shyly. "They must have dropped my keys back there," Logan sighed. Virgil bounced on his heel anxiously. "Do you want me to go get them?" No. Just wait here. I'll be back in a minute," Logan assured him. Virgil nodded and leaned against the car, watching Logan round the corner again. Nervously biting his lip, he waited for his crush to return. Chapter 14. Logan headed back to the alley, his nerves crawling up his throat. He never wanted to admit it, mainly to himself, but Remy really scared Logan. He made a detective uneasy. All of the information that Remy could hold about Logan's head to mentally torture him. The thought made him shudder. Logan turned the corner, seeing Remy and his friends standing and laughing at each other. When Remy saw Logan, his face dropped to a scowl. He smirked, and Logan puffed his chest. Logan straightened his posture and let out a breath. "What do you want?" Remy asked, earning a snicker from his friends. Logan paused. I wanted to look at one last thing before I left about my friend's case," Logan stated as he pushed past Remy and walked back over to where he was standing. He crouched down, pretending to look at Damien's small blood puddle. His eyes carefully scanned the ground, searching for a fully keychain. "You know, I don't mean to be a dick or call your bluff," Remy huffed. Logan looked over at him, his eyes angered. But I'm thinking you're lying to me. And Logan, you out of everyone here should know I hate to be lied to. Remy was growing closer to Logan, his friends right behind him. I don't know what you're saying, Remy, Logan retorted. You see, there you go again, lying to me. Remy's hand connected to Logan's side and pushed him over. Logan collided with the ground roughly, feeling his elbow begin to bleed against the hard, rocky ground. If you're so smart, I'd say, you looking for your keys? Remy questioned. Logan's eyes narrowed angrily. You know me, Remy, Logan yelled. He tried to push himself to his feet, and Remy only pushed him back down. Oh, but I do. Remy held out his hand to his friend, who placed a key chain full of keys in his hands. Logan's keys. Logan's eyes grew. He was speechless. Remy played with his keys in his hand, seeming to be enjoying the ringing of all the keys made against together. You know! Don't think I don't see past what you're doing to your little crush. I recognize him. Damien brought him along sometimes during our little deals. He's a quiet, shy, anxious little prick. Perfect for an asshole like you, Remy finished. I just want my keys, Remy. I mean no harm, Logan reassured him. Remy let out a shallow laugh. Oh, but I mean you harm. On cue, Remy's friends grabbed Logan by his arms, pulling him onto his knees. Logan fought against them, but he proved too weak. Remy pulled his syringe out of his pocket. Logan could see it be filled with some sort of liquid. This only made Logan try to fight them more. Remy flicked the syringe, getting out the air bubbles. With a smirk, he slowly approached Logan. One of the guys draped his upper arm, holding it still. Logan's eyes filled with fear. He became frozen in fear. Some other guy asked for this, but it'd be more fun to use it on you. Without another word, Remy put a needle of the syringe into Logan's arm. Logan screamed out and squirmed. Him squirming only hurt him more. He rather than have whatever Remy put into his body. Remy slowly pressed a thick liquid into his arms. Logan's eyes became droopy, and a sudden smile appeared on his face. Remy threw the syringe deep into the alleyway. When he was done, the two guys let him go. Logan fell to the ground. He was laughing to himself. Logan pushed himself onto his elbows and looked up to where Remy was. Remy and his friends had vanished, and now Virgil was on the ground, crouched next to him. Oh, holy fuck, Logan, Virgil cried. He had something shiny in his hands, but Logan couldn't focus on what it was before Virgil shoved it into his pocket. The emo wrapped Logan around with his arms, the back of his neck, hoisting him up onto his feet. Logan giggled, looking up at Virgil, who had tears slowly dripping down his cheeks. Your eyes are leaking, Logan mumbled with a small laugh. Virgil sighed. He couldn't even look at Logan. It hurt him to see his friend, his crush, like this. God, they did something really bad to put you into this state, didn't they? Yeah. My arm feels like a rubber ducky. Logan's speech slowed and slurred. You must be pretty tired, huh? You need to get some rest, Lo. I'll get you home, Virgil told him. Logan looked up, seeing Virgil's face, although it didn't appear to be Virgil's face. Pardon? Logan questioned. Virgil looked at him confused. Virgil looked around to see who Logan was talking to, only to realize that Logan was talking to him. Are you seeing things? Virgil looked into Logan's eyes. His pupils were wide. Even in the bright sun, Virgil's eyes widened. You're drugged! He exclaimed. Logan just tilted his head. I didn't know Patton knew what that meant. No, Logan, I'm Virgil. Oh, I really like Virgil, Logan mumbled. Virgil's face heated rapidly. His eyes widened, and small sweat beads fell down his brow. Finally, Virgil got Logan into the car. The emo just put the drug detective into the passenger seat and buckled him in. Virgil then walked to the other side of the car and sat with a heavy breath in the driver's seat. Virgil put the keys into his pocket. He had to fight one of Remy's friends for the keys, but it was better than walking back to the apartment with Logan in this condition. Virgil started the car and put his hands on the wheel. His hands were shaking. It had been a long time since he tried to drive. He put the car in drive and released the emergency brake and let the car start to move. He looked over at Logan, who was passed out in his seat. Virgil couldn't help but have a small smile. "Don't worry, Lo. You'll be better soon." Virgil then slowly drove back to Logan's apartment. 15. Virgil pulled into Logan's apartment building, the bottom of the car hitting the road as he pulled in. It made him yelp. The emo's heart was pounding and his hands were vibrating. Not only did he remember why he dropped out of driving lessons, but he had been honked and yelled at least 12 times to the drive. Virgil parked in Logan's spot, 113. He changed the gear, put on the emergency brake, and removed the key from the ignition. He leaned back heavily in the seat, panting with a slow tears streaming down his face. He turned over to Logan. His head was balanced on the shoulder with his mouth open and gap. Virgil let out a sigh, which melted into a smile. Virgil didn't want to admit it, but it was the truth. Virgil Black had fallen in love with Logan Sanders. Logan began to stir. A soft moan forced its way out of his body. He tried to lift his head up, proving too tired to do so. Virgil panicked slightly. He put his hand on the detective's shoulder. "It's okay, Lo. You're home in one piece. Just take it easy." Logan shifted his foggy gaze to Virgil's calm eyes. He seemed confused as to who was talking to, but shrugged it off quickly. "My head," Logan grumbled. "Yeah, you probably feel like shit," Virgil said. He then got out of the car and proceeded around to the other side of the car. He opened Logan's door and unbuckled his seatbelt. Logan was slowly slipping over towards Virgil's arm. Virgil caught Logan, who had fallen back asleep. The anxious man wrapped Logan's arm over his neck and hoisted him out of the car. Virgil shut the car door with his foot and waited for it to fully close. He started moving slowly, letting Logan's leg move along with Virgil's steps. The two moved at a snail's pace until they were stopped at the stairs. Virgil bit his lip. How was he supposed to work? He glanced at the man attached to his side. He was still fully asleep. Virgil looked back at the stairs, debating his options. Finally, Virgil swept Logan to his other arm. He stumbled and he got used to carrying Logan like he was his own tipsy bride. He then took heavy steps up the metal stairs. Logan slipped from his grasp every step he took. The last step onto the small platform that led to his front door felt Virgil was complete a marathon. His heart beat heavily in his chest. Virgil was about to reach out for Logan's doorknob when the door swung open. Virgil's face jumped up in surprise as he came face to face with a man with a freckled face that looked very similar to the person in his arms. "Oh God, what happened to Logan?" the man screamed. His hand gravitated to Logan's limp body, but Virgil stepped back, growing protective. Who are you, and how did you get into Logan's apartment?" Virgil questioned. The man pushed his glasses up. He looked at Virgil closely, his eyes growing wide. "You're Virgil Black!" the man exclaimed. Virgil swallowed heavily. Had he earned a reputation? Virgil's body began to shake, almost dropping Logan. The man picked up onto this. "Oh, no need to be afraid. I'm Logan's brother, Patton. I just heard a lot about you," Patton stated. Virgil's fear turned into a flustered blush. Virgil smirked, turning his face to his side. "Patton?" Logan mumbled from Virgil's chest. Virgil turned back to Logan. He pushed past Patton and set Logan on the couch. The detective shook his head, opening his eyes halfway. Patton shut the door and rushed over to the couch. "What happened?" Patton asked. "Some guy drugged him. I guess it was someone he knew," Virgil told him. Patton's eyes flooded with concern as he turned back to Logan, who was fighting to push himself up. "Hey, take it easy," Patton said, pushing him lightly in the chest, making him lay back down. Logan's forehead was dripping with sweat. Patton rushed to the kitchen to grab a rag. Virgil watched him go, but he was pulled from his thoughts when his hand laced itself in its own. Virgil blushed as he looked down at Logan. His eyes were more open this time, and he had a weak smile. A real weak smile. "Thank you," Logan muttered. Virgil smiled. "God, you make it sound like you're on your deathbed," Virgil joked, rolling his eyes. Logan coughed out a laugh. Not really. Thank you so much, Virgil. I owe you one. Penn rushed back in the rag with a glass of water. He put the water on the coffee table and placed the rag on Logan's wet, which Virgil couldn't really see, covered in cold water. Patton, what are you doing here? Logan questioned. Patton gave a confused look, not realizing that Logan was awake. Oh, Chief Thomas said you weren't answering your phone and asked me to check on you. I'm glad I did. I almost left, Patton exclaimed. Logan nodded, pulling his phone out from his pocket. His screen was cracked, and there was many missed calls from Logan's boss. Logan sighed heavily, putting his phone down and staring up at the ceiling. Virgil could see Logan's elbow was dried in a patch of blood. Patton seemed to notice, too, as he took a wag from Logan's forehead and began to wash Logan's elbow with it. Logan didn't seem to care. His mind was swimming. He was trying to deal with his own sober thoughts, whilst pushing the high thoughts out. You okay, Lo? Virgil asked. Logan looked up at him. His eyes were glazed and unfocused. He shook his head no to Virgil. His face adjusted. Patton finished cleaning his brother's arm, then running out of the room to go to the bathroom to clean out the rag. Logan threw his feet over the couch, sitting up properly now. His body swayed as he did so. Virgil rushed to sit next to him and give him balance. Hey, easy. You're still not you, I can tell. No, Virgil, I think it's the opposite. Virgil shot him a confused glance. I think I'm more like me than I've been in a long time, Logan sighed. His head drifted onto Virgil's shoulder. The emo shivered. But then he remembered their hands were still wrapped together. Virgil? Logan said after a long pause. Do you know why I'm committed to my job? Virgil shook his head slowly, holding his hand tighter. I have a feeling it has something to do with Damien, Virgil guessed. Yes, it does. Chapter 16. It happened when Logan was 14 and when Patton was only 10. Logan knew this for a fact. It was his birthday when it happened. Logan was practically bouncing with glee at his family loaded with their red minivan for a fun day out. The Sanders family didn't go out together very often. Logan's father worked constantly while Logan's mother worked for an important business man and got home late most nights. Patton was looking out the window, watching trees turn to bushes, which turned into a tall city of buildings. Logan was getting antsy. He loved going out into the city, especially to the local science museum. The family pulled into the giant building, paid for parking, and slipped into the spot close to the entrance. Logan's face couldn't shake the smile bound to his skin. They exited the car and started towards the doors at the front. Penn skipped along happily. The day was perfect. The sun was bright and warm with a cool breeze drifting through. Logan's parents paid for admission for the family. Logan's legs moved him towards the biology section of the museum. He always loved biology. Something about genetics, he thought. He interacted with the exhibits with Patton whilst his parents watched them, holding hands. He wished that day never ended. That he never had to leave. He was having so much fun, but Logan's parents told him that they had to go if they wanted to be home before dark. Logan sighed but nodded, following his parents and brother outside the doors. They walked back to the car. Penn had slowed down to walk at Logan's pace. What's your favorite thing about today? Penn's squeaky voice asked him. Logan smiled at his brother. It's hard to say. Everything here is such fun, but I'm glad I didn't go alone. Penn, Logan said, playfully shoving his brother's shoulder. Penn giggled as they wrapped around the car, getting inside. Logan's mother smiled to him as they pulled out of the parking lot. He gazed out the window, watching the green blurs of trees and shrubs. Logan smiled lazily. Today was perfect. Nothing could ever change that. An ear-piercing scream broke Logan from his thoughts. He launched himself over to look over at the street. He saw a big truck driving directly towards them. Logan's eyes widened and his body froze. Penn grabbed onto his arm, but Logan closed his eyes and braced for the impact. Logan could feel the car stop suddenly upon the impact. Was this what he wasn't prepared for? was another car coming from the side Patton was sitting on, also hit them. This sent the car rolling into the side. Logan felt glass cut his seatbelt loose and tumbled around the car. There were a lot of noises after that. It was becoming too much. Car horns were wailing, sirens were crying, people were yelling. It hurt his fragile mind. Logan opened his eyes slightly. The world was blurring around him. He realized his glasses weren't on his face anymore. He turned over, seeing Patton lay lifeless on the ground, with blood forming around him. Patton! Logan struggled to say. Logan tried to crawl over to his brother, but his leg was stuck under something. He looked over to see the top of the family's car had fallen onto his leg. Logan and Patton must have both got thrown from the car after the window shattered. Logan heard a muffled sound of talking in the distance. He looked over to them, seeing a boy who looked slightly older than him. He had a burn going down his left side of his face, and he was yelling at some other people. Logan thought, he was the man that ruined today. "There's another one!" someone shouted. Logan's head whipped around to see a fireman lifting the remainder of the car off of Logan's leg. A third fireman pulled Logan out. Hey, kid, look at me. Are you okay?" the fireman asked. Logan looked up at him, his eyes half closed. "Kid, can you tell me your name?" Logan Sanders, sir." Logan muttered. He shook his head, trying to get his thoughts straight in his head. "Okay, Logan, listen. We have to take you to the hospital. Your leg looks pretty busted," the fireman exclaimed. He then picked Logan up and ran him over to the ambulance. What about my brother?" Logan asked. "Don't worry, they got your brother in a different car. You two are going to be safe, I promise." Logan nodded and let their eyes slip closed. He drifted into a restless sleep after that, worry causing many nightmares. Logan awoke later in the hospital bed with a cast around his leg and it lifted into the air. His brain was foggy, and his arm was connected to many beeping machines. Logan looked to his right and saw Patton laying in the bed next to him with an oxygen mask over his nose. Patton, Logan breathed through slipping tears. A nurse walked into the room. When she saw Logan, her face lifted with a smile. "Hi there, Logan," the nurse greeted. What's wrong with Patton?" Logan asked, trying to wipe away his tears. The nurse frowned and looked upon the younger boy. "I'm afraid he slipped into a coma. I'm sorry, Logan. We've done everything we can to try to wake him up. The only thing we could do now is wait." Logan nodded, but more thoughts flooded his mind. "Where are our parents?" "That's why I came in here, Logan." The nurse pulled up a chair and sat down, her face grim. "They didn't make it. We brought them here to see if we could do anything, but it was clear that they weren't really hurt." Logan just nodded. Maybe the information hadn't clicked to him yet, or maybe because he didn't want to admit that he really assumed his parents' death. Maybe it was both. "Can I get you anything while I'm here, Logan?" the nurse asked kindly. Logan just shook his head, and the nurse left. He leaned back into his bed, staring at the ceiling. Today was far from perfect. So everyone, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's Wattpad Read Aloud. I stuttered a lot today, didn't I? Ha ha ha. Just to let you know that I'm not doing it over again because this is already my 4th take, and I am not doing this again. You can't make me. Ha ha. Like I said, thank you for listening. I hope you liked the book. This book is really interesting to me. It's actually, right now, one of my favorites that I've ever did for Wattpad Read Aloud. I have a really, really, really good book to plan next, but I love the mystery. Like, usually the detective is like, time to solve the case, ha ha ha. But then the detective became the culprit and stuff, and there's just layers upon layers, and I love it. Logan's arc works so good for this kind of scenario. I need to write a fanfiction like this. Of course, not directly copying, but like something within the nature of Logan being a detective. I mean, he was Sherlock in an episode, so it's not going to be too far-fetched. Okay, enough of me rambling about the book because you want me to end this. So I have social media down in the description. There should be a playlist of all the Wattpad Read Alouds on my screen. And like always, do your best.